In this week's Torah portion, we read one of the greatest episodes in Jewish and all of history. Chapter 22 in Genesis, Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. Yitzchak was born when Avraham was 100 years old, and Sarah was 90 years old. It was a miracle. And God had told Avraham, you're going to have a son, and through that son, Yitzchak, I'm going to build a mighty nation from your descendants. And now, 37 years later, an impossible test. God appears to Avraham, and he says, I want you to sacrifice that son whom you love. Sacrifice Yitzchak. Avraham could have asked all sorts of questions. He could have said, God, but you're contradicting yourself. You said he's going to be a great nation. He's single. He doesn't have any offspring. And God, you're asking me to bring a human sacrifice? I've spent my life campaigning against that in the pagan world. It doesn't really make sense. But Avraham doesn't say any of that. He doesn't ask any questions. He wakes up early in the morning, saddles his donkey, gets his attendants ready, takes Yitzchak, and they head out on the journey. They get to the mountain. Avraham tells his attendants to remain behind, and the passage says that Avraham and Yitzchak walk on together. But Yitzchak's a smart fellow. He realizes something's amiss. He says, Dad, yes, my son, I see the fire and I see the wood, but where's the lamb for the sacrifice? And Avraham tells him, God will show us the lamb for the sacrifice, my son. And that's when Yitzchak realizes he's the lamb. He's the sacrifice. Now, he could also ask all sorts of questions. I venture to think that if a 37-year-old man is told by his elderly father, son, God appeared to me yesterday, and he told me that I have to sacrifice you. Now, son, listen, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. I got to believe that any 37-year-old is going to say to his father, Dad, I love you, but maybe you drank something last night that you shouldn't have. Maybe that new cough medicine's a little too strong. Dad, why don't you sit down on the couch? Dad, put the knife down. We could talk about this. We can get you some help. Yitzchak doesn't do any of that. He doesn't ask any questions. The passage says they walk on together. Same goal, same purpose, same relationship. It's one thing for Avraham to get this impossible test, but at least he got it from God. Yitzchak has to trust his father, that his father heard the command from God. How does that happen? We as parents, as Jewish parents, we fret and we worry and we wonder, how can we bring up our kids? How can we bring up our kids Jewish? How can we bring up our kids in this world of ever-escalating temptation? So here's how. For 37 years before this event, there is no question that in order to create that relationship, Avraham must have showered that kid, Yitzchak, with love, wearing his love for him on his sleeve. And they must have been joined at the hip by a common purpose, serving God. And so now they go forward. The Medrash tells us that Yitzchak says to Avraham, Dad, bind me tight. I'm worried that I might flinch involuntarily and thereby render myself unfit as a sacrifice. So Avraham binds him, and he's ready to slaughter him. And he lifts the knife, and at the last second, the angel stops him and says, no, don't harm your son. God says to him through the angel, now I see that you weren't going to withhold your son. I see the level of sacrifice that you're willing for me. And Abraham brings a ram as a sacrifice instead of his son. They go down the mountain, and the passage again says they go on together. But this time they go on together with their attendants. They don't feel special. Avraham and Yitzchak have just scaled spiritual heights, the likes of which no one has before, showing sacrifice in the form and the shape that ever presently God remembers. Every time he judges the Jewish people, he remembers the binding of Yitzchak. And putting into our psyche, all Jews for coming generations, that ability to sacrifice anything for God. So they've reached these spiritual heights, they come back down to their attendants, and they don't feel that they're anything special. They're no different than the attendants. So that's our recipe if we want to bring up our kids and we want to raise the next generation. That's the lesson for older generations to younger generations. Shower those kids with love. Don't smother them, shower them. Join together for a common purpose to serve God. And do so humbly, because remember, compared to him, you are no better than anybody else.